Hi there, my name is Charles Duan. I am a postdoc fellow with Cornell Tech and also a fellow at American University and the R Street Institute, a think tank in DC. I'm happy to be talking about a paper that I'm co-authoring with the fantastic Chris Morton, who is a professor at Columbia University. The two of us have worked together a number of years on intellectual property issues, particularly in the healthcare space. And so we're excited to be talking about at-home diagnostic devices. The paper that we're presenting deals with the question of data on connected devices. As many people know with firsthand experience, there are lots of connected devices out there today. Everything from smartwatches to smart scales to forks that can count how many bites of food you take. And these devices provide all sorts of really useful information. But the real question for us that we want to approach in this paper is, how much access do the patients and people who use these devices really have to that wealth of information that potentially could be useful? And what systems do we have in place, and what systems could we put in place to try to improve that sort of access? What we find is that right now, most of these systems are fairly siloed. If you have data on one manufacturer's ecosystem, you can use other devices on that same ecosystem, but it's hard to transport that out to other places. And that's unfortunate for patients who want to move between different systems, who want to take advantage of the wealth of connected devices that are out there, for patients who want to do research on themselves, who want to find ways of improving their care. And it's a loss for society that that sort of data access doesn't exist, because lots and lots of really useful research can happen out of that. Competition among companies who are manufacturing the devices is spurred by patients being able to move between different ecosystems. There are lots of benefits to this sort of patient data access. Companies, of course, would prefer in many situations to lock down that sort of access because it keeps patients and consumers on their platforms and ecosystems. And they've raised a number of arguments against providing this sort of data access. The one that Chris and I focus on mostly are intellectual property concerns. And what we find is, although there are some intellectual property rights that might exist in the software on these sorts of devices, or in other components, possibly in certain computed values, by and large, the sorts of things that are stored on these sorts of devices, heart rate information, step counts, these sorts of physiological data, the sort of stuff that patients really want to try to take advantage of, there's not really that sort of protection. And so it would make a lot of sense to try to provide patients with access. And so in order to figure out what the best way to do that is, we go through a number of existing regimes for data access in the healthcare space and in others. We're also looking at California's privacy law that provides a right of access to social media data and other such data. We also look at GDPR and a number of other regimes. And what we try to do is take the best of each of these and assemble them into a framework that we can use to provide better patient access to the data that they have on these medical devices. And we hope that this sparks a conversation among policymakers and academics to start thinking about how we can make this wealth of information that potentially has all of these great benefits really accessible and useful to the world. We have two questions before me. The first is, what is one thing that we'd like people to know about this field? And I think it goes back to what I was saying at the very beginning. We call these connected devices, we call this the Internet of Things revolution, but really it's not as connected as we think it is. A lot of this data ends up just being so siloed and so inaccessible. The promise that we see in these sort of futuristic articles and TV shows where you have your door being able to talk to your cat feeder, being able to talk to your coffee maker, that sort of world doesn't exist, even though there may be a lot of benefits to that, particularly in the healthcare space. And what I think we really want to dig into in our paper is, how can we make that world more connected in ways that ultimately benefit patients and consumers? The second question is, what is our prediction for how this area will progress, or what we'd like to see happen in this area? And I think our paper fits into a really interesting and ongoing conversation about data and technological platforms today. The US Congress is looking at legislation dealing with social media data. This has been a topic in Europe for a number of different proposals. The ways in which so much data is being generated about consumers, and what access consumers should have, how privacy should work with these sorts of things, how should people be able to move among different platforms, often very large ones. I think that these are really important questions. And healthcare data is especially important within that conversation. So what we're hoping to do is sort of tie together many of the conversations that are happening about the healthcare space, especially as technology becomes more and more a part of that, with the conversations that are going on about big platforms, about data interoperability, about privacy, about security. All of these conversations, I think, kind of come together in the research that we're doing, and we're really excited about that.